The kitchen was warm that late Saturday morning, sunlight streaming through the wide windows that overlooked the backyard. Emily had always thought of the kitchen as the heart of her home. It wasn't just where meals were made, but also where memories seemed to linger. She could almost hear echoes of laughter from years past, the sound of clinking dishes during family dinners, and the small, tender conversations that seemed to happen only when someone leaned against the counter with a cup of coffee in hand. That morning, Emily was moving with quiet rhythm as she chopped vegetables for the soup she had planned for lunch. Her husband, David, was outside mowing the lawn, the steady hum of the machine drifting faintly through the screen door. The house was otherwise still, save for the faint sound of water running in the sink. It was then that she heard footsteps padding across the tile floor. She looked up and saw Ethan, her stepson, standing hesitantly near the doorway. Ethan was 17, tall but still holding on to some of the lankiness of adolescence. His dark hair fell a little into his eyes, and though he had grown so much in the last couple of years, there were moments, like the way he lingered in the doorway, that reminded Emily he was still figuring out how to navigate the world. "Hey, Ethan," Emily said warmly, setting down the knife and wiping her hands on a kitchen towel. "Hungry already? Or just keeping me company?" Ethan shrugged, a familiar half-smile tugging at his mouth. "Maybe both." She smiled, glad he had chosen to come in. Their relationship had been built slowly, layer by layer, over the years since she had married David. At first, she had been nervous about becoming a stepmother, unsure how Ethan would accept her. But time, patience, and genuine effort had softened those edges. Still, there were unspoken questions and boundaries they were both careful about. Ethan moved toward the counter and leaned against it, watching her. He seemed restless, like he wanted to say something but wasn't sure how to begin. Emily recognized that look. It was the same one David wore when something weighed on him, but he hadn't yet found the words. "You okay?" she asked gently. Ethan hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah. Just can I ask you something?" Emily tilted her head, sensing the seriousness in his tone. "Of course. You can always ask me anything." He glanced down at the counter, running his hand across the smooth surface before lifting his eyes to hers. "It's about stuff. Family stuff. And, well, about Mom." The words came quietly, almost carefully, as if he was afraid they might break something fragile in the air between them. Emily's chest tightened slightly, but she smiled softly, pulling out a chair at the kitchen table and gesturing for him to sit. "Let's talk. I'll make us some tea." Ethan sat down, resting his arms on the table. He looked older in that moment, weighed down by thoughts he didn't usually share. Emily busied herself with the kettle, giving him a moment to collect himself. When she sat across from him, steaming mugs between them, she leaned forward. "What's on your mind?" Ethan took a breath. "I was just wondering why things had to turn out the way they did. I mean, with Mom and Dad. And then with you. Sometimes I feel caught between everything. Like, I don't know where I'm supposed to stand." Emily felt her heart ache for him. Divorce was never easy, and though years had passed, she knew it had left questions in Ethan's heart that weren't easily answered. "I get that," Emily said softly. "It's a lot to carry, isn't it?" He nodded, his eyes dropping to the table. "Sometimes I feel guilty for being okay with things. Like, I love Dad and I care about you a lot, but then I think about Mom and how she feels, and I feel like I'm betraying someone no matter what I do." Emily reached across the table and placed her hand gently on his. "Ethan, you don't have to choose. Loving one person doesn't mean you're taking anything away from another. You have room in your heart for all of them. That's not betrayal. That's love." He swallowed, his throat tightening. "But what if Mom thinks I'm replacing her?" "You're not," Emily said firmly, though her tone remained gentle. "Nobody could ever replace your mom. She'll always be your mom, and that bond is something sacred. What you and I have is something different, but it doesn't take away from that. It just adds another layer to the people who care about you." Ethan nodded slowly, taking in her words. His gaze softened as he studied her, and for a moment, the guardedness in his expression faded. Emily remembered the early days when Ethan would barely look her in the eye, still loyal to the memory of his parents' marriage. She had respected his boundaries, never pushing, only offering kindness where she could. This moment in the kitchen felt like a quiet breakthrough, a glimpse into the trust he was extending toward her. You know, Emily continued, families aren't always neat and perfect. Sometimes they're messy, and sometimes they look different than what we imagined. But that doesn't make them any less real or any less important. What matters is the love we choose to give each other. Ethan exhaled, some of the heaviness lifting from his shoulders.
Yeah.
I guess that makes sense. They sat in silence for a moment, sipping their tea. The sound of the lawnmower had quieted outside, replaced by the chirping of birds. Emily felt grateful that Ethan had chosen to bring this to her, that he trusted her enough to voice the questions that weighed on him. Finally, Ethan spoke again, his voice softer now. Do you ever feel like you don't belong? Like you're trying to fit into something that wasn't meant for you? Emily blinked, surprised by the rawness of the question. Sometimes, yes, she admitted honestly. When I first became part of this family, I wondered every day if I was intruding, if I was asking too much of you and your dad. But then I realized families are built, not just born. And if we keep showing up for each other, if we keep trying, then we do belong. Maybe not in the way we first imagined, but in a way that's just as real. Ethan looked at her with something like relief in his eyes. Thanks, Emily. I don't always say it, but it helps. You help. Her chest warmed. She smiled and reached across to squeeze his hand once more. And you help me too, Ethan. More than you know. That morning in the kitchen, with sunlight spilling across the table and tea cooling in their mugs, something shifted between them. The unspoken distance that had lingered for years seemed to soften. For Emily, it was a reminder that love didn't always come in the form of perfection. Sometimes it came in the form of two people sitting in a kitchen, daring to ask the hard questions and finding answers together.